This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever.
He is sharp, intensely probing, and detail-oriented and focused.
Is Biden finished after a disastrous debate? Should you believe your eyes and ears when you see a man that doesn't seem mentally fit for office?
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look.
More importantly, if you can convince people of absurdities, doesn't that mean that you can convince them to commit atrocities? Maybe Voltaire was right. We'll talk about that, but more importantly, we're going to look at the big lies that came out of that debate and ask the real question. Who should a values-based voter vote for in 2024? We'll talk about that and more today on Indie Thinker. Welcome to the show. My name is Reed Huberman, and I'm the founder of Indie Thinker Media. Now, stop me if you heard this one before. Donald Trump loves Nazis. In fact, he praised Nazis in Charlottesville and said, there's good people on both sides of that attack. Now, if you're Joe Biden, that level of dishonesty could be misunderstood as mere incompetence or absent-mindedness, since the debate on Friday showed that Biden clearly does not know where he is most of the time. But for those who'd like to hear the full context of what Trump said way back about Charlottesville, here it is.
Very fine people on both sides. And you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists.
Now, countless times since Joe Biden decided to run and since he has become the president, he has told us that Trump endorsed Nazis in Charlottesville. And in a word, that is a lie.
Liar! Liar!
Everything that Biden has said since then should be suspect. And that's why I want to pinpoint three of the biggest lies that Biden told in the debate between Donald Trump and himself, because I think it will help fuel our understanding of who we should be voting for in the future. Now, the first one I want to point out is Biden and Trump's conversation about abortion. Is Joe Biden simply an abortionist in the case of rare exceptions like life of the mother, incest, and rape, those kind of things? Well, let's see what they had to say.
You got to get elected. The problem they have is they're radical because they will take the life of a child in the 8th month, the 9th month, and even after birth. After birth, if you look at the former governor of Virginia, he was willing to do this. He said, we'll put the baby aside and we'll determine what we do with the baby, meaning we'll kill the baby.
By the way, this was fact-checked by all the fact-checkers, and of course they said, this is misleading, but I'll show you the clip right here of Ralph Northam saying exactly what Donald Trump just said.
And it's done in cases where there may be severe deformities, there may be a fetus that's non-viable. So in this particular example, if a mother is in labor, I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired. And then a discussion would ensue between the physicians and the mother.
So there is no way around this. The governor was simply saying that it is the mother's right to choose whether or not you resuscitate, and that should not have any kind of regulation by the government. So the government has no interest whatsoever in seeing a baby that could be saved right there in front of everybody. The government has no interest in rescuing that baby. It is up to the mother whether or not they do that. So just for clarification purposes and to remind you that you can't trust the fact checkers, what Trump said right there is totally true. But let's see what Biden has to say in response.
What happened is we brought it back to the states, and the country is now coming together on this issue. It's been a great thing.
Thank you. President Biden?
It's been a terrible thing, what you've done. The fact is that the vast majority of constitutional scholars supported Roe when it was decided, supported Roe. And that's this idea that they were all against it is just ridiculous.
Let me also fact check here one more time. There's a one Ruth Bader Ginsburg who said exactly what Roe v. Wade was, spurious constitutional law. Check it out.
I thought Roe v. Wade was an easy case, and the Supreme Court could have held that most extreme law unconstitutional and put down its pen. Instead, the court wrote an opinion that made every abortion restriction in the country illegal in one fell swoop. And that was not the way that the court ordinarily operates.
Everybody knows that Roe v. Wade should have been overturned, including RBG. And so constitutional scholars who say anything different than that are probably figments in Joe Biden's imagination.
And this is the guy who says the state should be able to have it. We're in a state where in 6 weeks, you don't even know whether you're pregnant or not, but you cannot see a doctor, and have him decide on what your circumstances are, whether you need help. The idea that states are able to do this is a little like saying we're going to turn civil rights back to the states. Let each state have a different rule.
Well, that's interesting, because you would think that the right to not be killed is a civil right, but not according to Joe Biden.
Look, there's so many young women who have been, including a young woman who just was murdered, and he went to the funeral. The idea that she was murdered by an immigrant coming in, they talk about that. But here's the deal: there's a lot of young women who are being raped by their in-laws, by their spouses, brothers and sisters, it's just ridiculous, and they can do nothing about it.
Yes, that is
and
ridiculous.
They try to arrest them when they cross state lines.
Thank you.
There have been many young women murdered by the same people he allows to come across our border. We have a border that's the most dangerous place anywhere in the world, considered the most dangerous place anywhere in the world. And he opened it up, and these killers are coming into our country, and they are raping and killing women. And it's a terrible thing. As far as the abortion is concerned, it is now back with the states. The states are voting. In many cases, it's frankly a very liberal decision. In many cases, it's the opposite. But they're voting, and it's bringing it back to the vote of the people, which is what everybody wanted, including the founders, if they knew about this issue, which, frankly, they didn't. But they would have. Everybody wanted brought back. Ronald Reagan wanted it brought back. He wasn't able to get it. Everybody wanted it brought back, and many presidents had tried to get it back. I was the one to do it. And again, this gives it the vote of the people, and that's where they wanted it. Every legal scholar wanted it that way.
Staying on the topic of abortion, President Biden, 7 states.
Folks, I hate asking for money. It's my least favorite part of running for office. I know how hard you work.
I'll let you do that. This is the same topic. 7 states have no legal restrictions on how far into a pregnancy a woman can obtain an abortion. Do you support any legal limits on how late a woman should be able to terminate a pregnancy?
I supported Roe v. Wade, which had 3 trimesters. The first time is between the woman and the doctor. Second time is between the doctor and an extreme situation. The third time is between the doctor, between the woman and the state. The idea that the politicians, that the founders wanted the politicians to be the ones making decisions about women's health is ridiculous. That's the last. No politician should be making that.
Okay, what Biden just said right there is the most incomprehensible thing that he said in the whole debate, but it kind of flew under the radar because a lot of people don't know what he's talking about. He's simply alluding to the fact that under Roe, there was a trimester system, and the trimester system looked like this: that in the first trimester, a mother could abort their child without any care in the world, other than maybe conscience. And then in the second trimester, the state would kick in and regulate abortion, but never outlaw abortion. And then in the third trimester, the state could regulate and could outlaw, but not necessarily. So what Biden is saying there is kind of half true, but there was never a mandate against third trimester abortions in Roe v. Wade. Roe v. Wade was simply the erroneous case law that tried to connect the 14th Amendment to abortion, saying that a woman has the right to privacy and somehow murdering a baby is a right to privacy. So all of this comes back to the reality that, first and foremost, Roe v. Wade was erroneous Supreme Court law from the very beginning. So not only are people like Ruth Bader Ginsburg being very honest, unlike Joe Biden, it's kind of beside the point, because what Joe Biden says is totally ridiculous. Politicians involving themselves in a woman's right to quote-unquote choose was absolutely held under Roe v. Wade. So what do you call the state slowly but surely getting involved in protecting the life of a child in the second trimester, and then more aggressively in the third trimester, except politicians being involved. So he says the founding fathers never meant that politicians should be involved in the right of a mother to choose. Well, Roe v. Wade actually implemented that. So what he's saying obviously doesn't make sense, but I'm not sure that Joe Biden knows that it doesn't make sense. But let's just be really honest about this. Joe Biden has never come out against third trimester abortions. And even if he did, the real question underneath all of this is, even if you throw out the fact that politicians definitely were involved in a woman's right to quote unquote choose, and the fact that the Roe v. Wade in the first place was erroneous Supreme Court law and not backed by scholars, even if you push all that aside, the real question at the end of the day is just simply this. Why would you protect a third trimester baby, as Biden seems to be alleging here, but not a second trimester and not a first trimester? If a baby in the womb at third trimester is a human being, what happened magically between second and first trimester that changed that? Let's go to the scholars here, the real ones, the biologists, who kind of study life. And the vast majority of them, about 96% of them, hold to the view that at conception a new life form is created because new DNA is created that did not before exist. So you've got the DNA of the mother, the DNA of the father, they combine to form a whole new life form at the first trimester. It is totally irrational to believe that in the third trimester, all of a sudden, you can come through the magical birth canal and poof, out comes a human being. Well, what was it 3 hours ago? What was it 3 weeks ago? Well, of course, we all know via Bill Burr.
And then you were like, well, that wasn't a cake yet. It's like, well, it would have been if you didn't do what you just did. There would have been a cake in 50 minutes. You cake murdering son of a...
It was a human being then, and it should be protected. This is why it is ridiculous and irrational to talk about a woman's choice or to talk about the government infringing upon a woman's body. Well, the government has a right to infringe upon the body of people who are causing bodily harm to another human being. What all happened to the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? It's hard to pursue life and happiness when you're dead. So the government obviously has a stake in protecting the innocent, unborn human beings that are in the womb. All of this talk about fetus and even all of this talk about rape and incest is all kind of smoke to blow in the face of an obvious, sinful, egregious problem that we have here in America. Might I remind you that 98% of all abortions, and that's being charitable, happen as a result of convenience. Only 2% happen for rape, incest, and quote-unquote life of the mother. And I say that simply because quote-unquote life of the mother, it is never medically necessary to abort a baby to save a mother. Now, a baby may die in the process of trying to save the mother, but it is not simply because you are intentionally aborting that baby. If you really want to trust the experts, you need to trust those gynecologists, biologists, and doctors out there who will tell you the exact same thing. And so the real question at the end of the day is just this. What is life? Why should it be protected? And the only coherent view is the one that I hold based upon science and, of course, based upon my faith. Everything outside of that is totally erroneous or worse, a lie, which Joe Biden, give him the benefit of the doubt on this one. I don't think he knows what he's talking about, so maybe not totally lying. However, he's definitely lying about this next thing when it comes to immigration.
President Biden, a record number of migrants have illegally crossed the southern border on your watch, overwhelming border states and overburdening cities such as New York and Chicago, and in some cases causing real safety and security concerns. Given that, why should voters trust you to solve this crisis?
Because we worked very hard to get a bipartisan agreement that not only changed all of that, it made sure that we are in a situation where you had no circumstance where they could come across the border with the number of border police there are now. We significantly increased the number of asylum officers. By the way, the Border Patrol endorsed my position.
Well, is that true? Did the Border Patrol endorse Joe Biden? According to their account on X, to be clear, we have never and never will endorse Biden. But it gets better.
In addition to that, we found ourselves in a situation where when he was president, he was separating babies from their mothers, putting them in cages, making sure the families were separated. That's not the right way to go.
I don't know if you remember these pictures that were being shopped around back in Trump's administration that were actually from Barack Obama's administration. So the kids in cages were from his good buddy Barack. So yet another lie from Joe Biden.
What I've done since I've changed the law, what's happened, I've changed it in a way that now you're in a situation where there are 40% fewer people coming across the border illegally. It's better than when he left office. And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look, we had the safest border in the history of our country. The border, all he had to do was leave it. All he had to do was leave it. He decided to open up our border, open up our country.
And I can tell you, I definitely do not know what he said. But if you want to hear directly from the people who are responsible for these kind of things, here's Mr. Thomas D. Homan, retired acting director of the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. President Biden is the first president to ever unsecure a border on purpose. The current administration's failure to enforce and uphold the laws as written by Congress are not just matters of legal debate, but have led to unimaginable suffering and death for Americans and migrants alike. For 3 years, this administration has directed and overseen the implementation of an open borders agenda that has resulted in a national security, humanitarian, public health, and public safety catastrophe unlike any we have ever witnessed at America's borders. And then also we have Mr. Joseph B. Edlow, former acting director and chief counsel of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. He said this: the Biden administration has waged war against the immigration system of the United States. The results speak for themselves. As each memorandum, regulatory action, or policy decision is announced, the crisis at the southwest border grows exponentially. There is a direct correlation between these policies and the exploding number of encounters, the number of known and unknown gotaways, and backlogs at both USCIS and the immigration courts. Now, furthermore, I want to bring this stat up to you so that you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that America is a more dangerous place with open borders. According to the Heritage Foundation, a 2021 Department of Justice report revealed that 64% of federal arrests in 2018, now this is during Trump's administration, involved non-citizens. So 64% of arrests involved non-citizens, despite them comprising only 7% of the population at the time. So this is all the way back in 2018. So can you imagine what it looks like now that Joe Biden has broken every immigration record known to mankind by allowing more than 10 million immigrants into the country? You can only imagine what these numbers look like now, and they haven't really processed this data yet, and the numbers are still coming in. But you don't even have to look simply at violent crime in terms of rapes and murders, because we all know that there's an untold story in terms of death and destruction of an open border. And that comes in the way of people who are being brought through the border who are either being human trafficked and raped along the way or even killed along the way in order to come to this country, but also the drugs that are being smuggled into this country and the people's lives who will be affected as a result of that. The fact of the matter is that the idea that a benevolent policy is an open border policy is totally and ridiculously stupid. Not only does it overtax the systems that are meant for the American citizens, but simply it doesn't help those immigrants in the best way possible. Legal immigration does. Now, we can all agree that there needs to be reforms in the way that legal immigration is taking place here in America. The system may be deeply broken, but it does not mean that you crack open our border wall and then allow who knows what to come through our borders. That is a recipe for disaster. And then finally, the biggest lie of the debate, and one that we probably all knew going in if we didn't want to delude ourselves, is that Joe Biden is mentally competent to be our president. Now, not only was Joe Biden's performance ridiculous, but even when he wasn't performing, you can look at his face, and you can either tell that, as you see on the screen now, Joe Biden is staring into the abyss of the afterlife that awaits him, or he is actually in real time hearing Donald Trump tell him that he is president and all of the horrible things he has done, and it is surprising to Joe Biden, and he's thinking to himself like Urkel. Did I do that? And the answer to that is yes, you did do that, Joe Biden. But far before this debate, it wasn't just Joe Biden lying to us that he was mentally fit for office. The Praetorian Guard, mainstream media, was also lying to us repeatedly about Joe Biden's fitness for office.
He is sharp, intensely probing, and detail-oriented and focused.
This is a man who is sharp, who is on top of his game, who knows what's going on.
This guy's tough. He's smart. He's on his game. His mental acuity is great.
This is a very sharp president.
This is a man that's on his game.
President Biden is absolutely fit.
There's not a problem.
He's sharp, he's fit, he's always answering questions.
He is on the ball.
He was sharper than anyone I've spoken to.
He is sharp. He is on top of things.
There's no doubt in my mind that the president is mentally fit for office.
Biden has proven himself to have a strong memory.
He's completely mentally sharp.
He's at the top of his game.
Now, after that debate, I can't do thinking for you. I can only encourage you to truly, honestly answer the question: is Joe Biden fit for office, as the media has been telling us, or is another candidate a far better option than Joe Biden? But there are people who are still going to vote for Joe Biden, regardless of what their eyes and their ears tell them, as you can see in this clip.
Folks, I don't walk as easy as I used to. I don't speak as smoothly as I used to. I don't debate as well as I used to. But I know what I do know. I know how to tell the truth. I know right from wrong.
Now, I want to make something clear. These people don't just hate Donald Trump blindly. They're not just cheering against Donald Trump. They're actually cheering for Joe Biden after the debate as a viable option, as he tells them, "I'm not stepping down." Even after his disastrous performance, they will still support him. And the real question is, why? Now, I've thought about this a lot, and I think the only answer when we talk about values-based voting is this: morality and honesty are not principles of the Democratic Party. Now, let me explain. I'm not saying Republicans tell the truth all the time, or that Donald Trump is even generally honest. I'm simply saying that honesty and truth is not a virtue of the modern left. Now, think about it this way. Liberals are primarily concerned with freedom. I mean, it's in the name. Liberality means freedom, libertas. So they want to ensure freedom for people. It is clear, especially during Pride Month, that Joe and his friends do not wish to preserve truth. They don't wish to preserve the truth of what marriage and family is all about in America. They believe in individual freedom, regardless of what it means, even if it means chopping off the fully functioning sexual organs of grown men dressed as women and dancing provocatively in front of children. Conservatives, on the other hand, believe in freedom, but it is not their end goal. Freedom is a means to an end. It secures for us the ability to do that which is right, which means there are limits to freedom. If freedom leads you to something that isn't right, it must be stopped. Conservatives believe freedom without virtue is a vice, while liberals believe freedom is the ultimate virtue, and the only thing that should limit freedom is consent. As long as you consent, go ahead, do it. Proof that this is true is right in front of you. If Biden believed in virtue, he'd step aside and let someone else lead. If modern Democrats cared about moral virtue, they'd be the ones begging Biden to step aside for his own good. Now, they may be. The mainstream media started telling the truth, like I said, the night after the debate, but that quickly gave way to Joe Biden insisting that he's running for office, and he just had a bad night. And so that truth-telling was sadly short-lived. The reason is because truth is not a virtue of the left. They will place their ideological goals over doing what is right every time. The more I've thought about this, the more I feel like I've seen this refusal to let the right thing get in the way of securing power. And of course, it's the habit of despotic rulers of the past. That's where I've seen it, and specifically despotic pagan rulers of the past. The long history of the iron grip of the despot was largely broken by Christian values and ethics that were prominent in the founding of America, which can be seen in things like the Mayflower Compact, which was an overtly Christian document that compelled others to believe that we should lead each other because we all serve the same God. Now, I'm not saying that there weren't Christian tyrants in history. I'm only saying this, that it took a moral system to break the spell of despotic paganism. I'm saying that when a biblical form of Christianity was fleshed out in America, it broke the pagan curse on this nation and on parts of the world as we know it today. I fear we don't have a moral leader in either candidate in 2024. So I'll be honest about that, because I realize Trump was accused of hanging on to power in 2020, but this feels different. It feels different because as much as Trump has been tied to the affairs of January 6th, he isn't. He told people to peacefully and patriotically protest, but they didn't. Here, Biden is willfully hanging on to power after 50 years in government, enduring obvious mental decline. If you can cheer in the face of those realities, you don't care about the truth. And maybe Kierkegaard's story of the clown was right. He said this: a fire broke out backstage in a theater. The clown came out to warn the public. They thought it was a joke and they applauded. He repeated it. The acclaim was even greater. I think that's just how the world will come to an end. To general applause from wits who believe it's a joke. In other words, a society occupied with entertaining itself will never applaud the right things because they don't care about the truth. You may not believe in the God of the Bible as I do. You should, but for the love of everything holy, have enough self-respect to believe the evidence, the truth of your eyes and your ears, and then vote accordingly. All right, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and go with God.